Welcome to the PricePlow Podcast. Today we have a very fun episode. We are in my home state of New Jersey, so welcome to Jersey. But if you're watching online, this was filmed live at SupplySide Connect New Jersey. I've been rehearsing that all week.
You did so good.
I almost said SupplySide East.
No, you did.
So today we're going to talk about trends that are going on right now, not just at this show, but things that are like important going on in the industry. So we've brought together a couple different people that put together education and content, and we're excited to talk about some new trends, but I'm actually really excited to not host this. So we typically start off with introductions. So Cassie and then Josh, if you guys could talk about who you are, what you do, that'd be a great way to start.
Okay. Again, Cassie Smith, Senior Editorial Content Director of SupplySide. So all the content, I am responsible for the teams who create all the content on SupplySide Supplement Journal, SupplySide Food and Beverage Journal, and as well as the conference content at SupplySide Connect New Jersey, I will send it to, and SupplySide Global. So that's all under my purview, and one of my wonderful colleagues here is Josh.
Hey, I'm Josh Long, Associate Editorial Director at SupplySide, lawyer by training, journalist by choice. Been covering the industry for 12, 13 years. We used to be known as Natural Products Insider. Everybody in the industry gets all the trade rags confused, but now that we are under the SupplySide umbrella, hopefully you guys will associate us with SupplySide. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, you ready? Josh, we're just gonna really kick it to you first. Yeah, get ready. Drink down that beer. Let's talk about tariffs. That seems to be the one thing that everyone's chatting about today and for probably the rest of the year. You had a regulatory panel yesterday. Anything come out of that that's important for us to know?
There were some exemptions that were granted for the tariffs, as part of the Trump administration's list of exemptions. I don't have them in front of me. There's efforts by the trade associations to request additional tariff exemptions. I got the sense from talking to some, industry insiders that they're not extremely confident that those exemptions will be granted. There's obviously a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Talked to a C-level executive yesterday who said he was in a 4.5-hour meeting yesterday or the day before about tariffs, so it's on everybody's mind.
I've been walking around the show in preparation for this podcast asking everyone what the most exciting things that they saw or talked about was, and everyone just responded, all we've been doing is talking about tariffs. But from my perspective, the big thing is that just the uncertainty. I want to ask you, with everything that you've experienced and seen, what seems to be the criteria for being on or off the exempt list? It seems like we don't know.
I mean, we need to look into that more because I was asking, folks about that. I think one of them is the opportunity, whether we can actually produce this stuff domestically. And if you can't produce it domestically, then that would be a reason for an exemption, the importance of the commodity, I guess, to the U.S. economy. But I don't know all the reasons that form the basis for granting an exemption, so I can't give you an answer, Ben.
Right. I think there was a quote from Lauren Israelson that he said the criteria seems to be completely unknown, but some other trade associations have been having some meetings with White House administrations and feeling pretty confident about some things getting on the list.
Yeah, like I said, several of the vitamins were already exempted, and I think NMM and niacin, I believe, and some other dietary ingredients. But as far as the botanicals, we talked about this in a regulatory session yesterday. Those were not exempted, and I didn't get the real feeling from talking to the few people I did talk to that there's a great opportunity for exemptions in that category. So if that's the case, that's not good news for the industry.
Yeah. I think the hard part about it, though, is that with botanicals, there's a lot of situations where does America have the environment to grow those here? Right, a lot of things are grown in specific areas for specific reasons, and then when you look at maybe other byproducts, even just talking about creatine, for years we've talked about bringing creatine to America, but when we try to get someone to do it, they all say not in my backyard, right? So it's not a super clean process. So there's no reason. We all understand 77% of creatine in America comes from China. We all talk about German creep here and everything, but that's only 17% of the imports that come into America. So for a lot of people, they're not super interested in coming to America, and right now we're just going to have to deal with the pricing cost differences.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested long term. I don't know enough about the subject, but we'd love to report on it and investigate it. What is feasible in terms of producing more ingredients in the United States? What tax breaks need to be granted? What other incentives could the United States government offer to if they really want to bring back manufacturing, for example, in this industry? What does that look like? What needs to happen in order for for the industry to really thrive? I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I agree, and I wonder, we can't just put the industry on hold for a couple years, so we move everything over here. It doesn't work like that.
And that's been the most frustrating thing, even just in the short term, is unfortunately having this show on Tuesday, Wednesday, when everything gets announced Friday, and we're in the middle of this, and it's all uncertainty. That's been the answer to everything. I don't know yet. During this meeting, I think the tariffs got put on a break. During yesterday, they got doubled.
Yeah.
It's hard to discuss it when it's moving around so much. But one of the things I thought was interesting was I thought we were going to talk a lot about stuff coming to America, but a lot more of my conversations were about moving to India or other locations. One company pointed out to me that when you look at other industries like textiles or clothing and stuff, a lot of that moved to Indonesia or Thailand. Not all of it is in China anymore, but as an industry, we've still stayed pretty heavy in China. I think you've been doing some work with stories on China.
Yeah, the reporting we're doing in China is really from the regulatory standpoint. I pull the CGMP data every year, the audits that FDA does, and it's actually extraordinary how few audits the FDA does in China. I don't know if that's based on politics, but the last numbers I got, I believe it was, don't hold me to this, half a dozen audits or something like that in China. And so then my question was, well, how many finished products are coming from China? If we're only auditing 5 facilities, are there a bunch of finished products? Some of the trade associations say, oh, no, there's not a lot of finished products being shipped into the United States, finished dietary supplement products being shipped into the U.S. But actually, I got a bunch of information from FDA recently, and I haven't really had time to digest it. There is quite a few lines of finished products coming from China. So I'm blabbing on, but what is the oversight in China? I would argue it's woefully inadequate.
You can't talk about FDA audits without mentioning that they don't even audit very much within the domestic states, and with the cuts in employment there, that's supposed to go down even more. But I was surprised to hear you say that people claim that there aren't finished product goods coming from China, because soft gels, gummies, all sorts of Temu level stuff coming to go to fulfillment by Amazon. There's a lot of people bringing in finished product goods. Probably not as much as raw ingredients, but that's definitely something.
Yeah, and you got to have oversight over that, obviously. And if the FDA doesn't have the manpower to audit those facilities, that's concerning from a safety standpoint, as far as I'm concerned.
It's just frustrating. At this point, Wednesday, there's not that much that we can really talk about. Everything's going to be changing for the rest of the week. Hopefully, new trade deals are going to be worked on. But for SupplySide Connect right now, there's not that much information, but there's a lot of conversation occurring, which is why I love coming to SupplySide.
Can you talk a little, Josh, about you watched the FDA oversight meeting today? Anything come out of that we need to know?
The FDA, the hearing?
Yeah.
That was actually this morning. There was a hearing in D.C. The Committee on Oversight held a hearing on keeping illicit products off the market. I will just say, so I'm not burying the lead, there wasn't a lot of talk about dietary supplements, but there was a gentleman who was present, whom some of you or many of you may know in this room, a Dr. David Kessler. He was the commissioner of FDA for many years, I believe 1990 to 1997. And in all the years I've been covering this industry, not one soul has said anything kind about the man. I've never had a conversation with him, but apparently he was and is anti-supplements. And one of the narratives that emerged from that hearing today is he's extremely concerned with RFK Jr. and the Trump administration and what they're doing to FDA. And actually, I think I have some quotes here, Cassie. Let me. real quick. He had a couple of doozies. The hell did he say? Well, one of the Democrats called him a legend. I thought that was interesting. Let's see. One of his quotes is, "I fear we are less safe today." This is his quote talking about FDA and the 3,500 employees that were axed. This was this morning. He said, "This may not be fixable. This may affect us for decades." So there was a lot of talk about chaos, uncertainty, dysfunction, and the administration endangering public health. And of course, the Republicans, it's a completely different narrative. And there was some fireworks this morning with Representative Green, and one of the Democrats. You just watched it on YouTube. It was hilarious.
Wasn't there a quote of Kessler informing people or instructing people not to follow DSHEA or not to enforce DSHEA when he was at the FDA? There's a bunch about he just was anti-dietary supplement, which is really concerning for someone in charge of the association that's supposed to enforce the safety and manufacturing regulations around supplements.
I wasn't covering it back then. Everybody says he was anti-dietary supplements, but I think if we even step back more, the impression I get is that the FDA bureaucracy over the decades has been anti-supplements. If you look back, even the most recent commissioners, the Commissioner Califf, he was at an event in a conversation with CRN, and he made some remarks that indicated that he wasn't a huge fan of supplements. Scott Gottlieb, Dr. Gottlieb, he wanted to initiate modernization efforts for the supplement industry. So I don't really think the people that are leading the agency over the decades have had a really, glowing view of dietary supplements, because they really come from the medical establishment, which is interesting because now we have, RFK Jr. and I think the Wall Street Journal said it's his FDA, and he's supposedly pro supplements. So should be interesting.
Just a reminder to the folks out here, if you have a question, please raise your hand and ask. I'm looking this way, but Ben maybe has a better viewpoint for the, yeah.
I'll catch one.
Wave hard. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I'm wondering if you're going to pull us off of the politics or not.
Well, it's so fascinating, I guess. What I find fascinating, and then we can go off politics, is that yes, there's this uncertainty. Yes, there's chaos. Yes, we don't know what the hell's going on. But it's also very business as usual. For these companies, for coming here, we're doing this show. We're talking about the normal stuff. There's still ingredient companies. There's still brands. We're all still moving forward. So I'm just so interested to see what the actual impact will be, because no one really has said anything. It's all just scary and we're unsure, but as far as I can tell, and there's nothing has happened yet that has changed anyone's behavior or way of doing business.
It's kind of frustrating because we do have existing regulatory framework and we get painted as Wild West. Now, obviously the tariffs discussion is we are probably one of the smallest buckets when it comes to, but that is obviously a huge deal for us. But even when we talk about, RFK's FDA, it's still business as usual because we do have a regulatory framework that everyone is used to running. We did have a regulatory talk yesterday. Yeah. There is enough to continue to follow. There are, SOPs in place. So when they start, changing everything, we can still keep working. I would love for them to come visit SupplySide and come see what a rich culture we have here of regulatory professionals and people who care about quality.
I agree. And I guess we can't get off politics without really talking about, and maybe you have some cool perspectives on this, Ben, is sort of this MAHA movement, love it or hate it, what it's doing, potentially what it could do to the industry. I'm just interested on your perspective on that. Have you seen?
So I've spent a couple years down in DC with NPA. I'm going with CRN as well this year. So I've gotten involved. And I think one of the big things that I've noticed is it's really great that we all go and talk, but not a lot occurs. And there's obviously a lot that we would like to change about the system. But at the same time, like, we're all pretty cushy with Deshay. Like, we all like the way that the framework is set up.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to a point where it's kind of like, if things kind of get blown up and we have to have some new, like, people are talking about Deshay 2.0.
Yeah.
People are talking about a lot of new things. We're kind of opening Pandora's box when we look to change stuff, but it is kind of exciting to consider maybe a new direction, but it is also scary when RFK wants to get rid of, self-affirmed grass, which so many people utilize for good quality products and not as a loophole as he's kind of considering it to be.
Yeah.
So it's, again, uncertain. Uncertainty is it's where we're all at right now.
Cassie, I might regret saying this, but just this week it occurred to me, looking at the dysfunction in D.C. and the hatred on both sides of the aisle, even in this industry, this is just one person's opinion of covering it, like as an outsider. It seems like there's so many different stakeholders and silos, and that there really isn't a lot of room for discourse to respectfully debate each other. And I've been noticing it more and more and more, like over the years. And it's, I don't know, just as a human being, like discouraging. And it really is a real thing. And I've also noticed in this industry, maybe it's just human nature, but there's just a ton of judgment. And he said, she said, and he's wrong for this reason, or she's wrong. And I wouldn't characterize this industry as united by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't think that serves the industry well when they go to Washington, D.C., for example, because they don't have a unified message. And if you don't have a unified message up there, I just don't think you're going to get much accomplished.
I couldn't have said better, but I will try something. I just said I'm going to D.C. twice with two different associations, and I think that shows a lot. Like, we don't have a unified front, which is like kind of disappointing as an industry where we all agree on the fact that we need to be pushing for health, quality supplements, quality nutrition. I think that the cool thing about the MAHA movement is that for once in a long time, like, the health of Americans is on the front row of the talks. The sad part about it is that the amount of divisiveness that it inspires. And it's like, well, if I criticize anything about RFK, I'm all of a sudden the bad guy. Mm-hmm. Or if I support him, I'm supporting maybe some things that I don't necessarily agree with. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to have a nuanced take on any of this. Yeah. You write an article, or I do a video and I get 200 comments telling me what an idiot I am because I have a little bit of a different opinion. And I'm just trying to make sure that, like, from my perspective, I just consider myself an educator. I'm just putting the information out. I try not to put any bias or opinion in there. Yeah. I try to give the information so that everyone else can understand it, at least form an opinion for themselves. And that's really hard to do right now.
I totally agree with you. Like you said, like the lack of nuance. I mean, it's like either you're pro-RFK or anti-RFK. No, I think preventative medicine's awesome. I think health and nutrition and fitness and eating healthy, which I don't do, is awesome. I think it's awesome in theory. I don't actually practice it. But, that's cool. Cutting FDA, like gutting all those people that have collectively hundreds of thousands of years of experience. Is that like an awesome move? Yeah. I'm not really quite sure about that. The self-grass thing, maybe that is cool in the sense of it's maybe not practical because you're not going to have the resources and it could slow innovation. But on the other hand, if you're pro-transparency, then FDA should at least know what the heck is on the market in terms of ingredients. So I see like both sides. I see good and bad with somebody like RFK, but in this industry, it seems like you can't even have those conversations, or the executives that disagree can't have those conversations.
It reminds me of the MPL discussion, right?
Yeah.
MPL, we haven't talked as much recently about because we've had bigger fish to fry, but you were either pro or anti, and like to saying like, hey, the answer's most likely somewhere in the middle. Yeah. No one liked that answer because everyone wants you in their camp.
MPL, Ben, can you just define that?
Yeah.
Mandatory product listing. I'm sorry for anyone that doesn't know. It was an idea that any product, not ingredients, but if someone takes a bunch of ingredients and puts them together before they go to market, you'd have to go to the FDA and have it approved. And as much as some people said that it wasn't pre-market approval, it was mandatory product listing, which to me sounds a lot like the same thing. And it's my issue with it is when you look down that, we talked about how few audits the FDA actually completes every year. So if the FDA can't even go audit manufacturing facilities, how do we feasibly accept the idea that they have enough manpower to review all of these labels and approve them? And then what criteria are they approving it based on? Because right now we can't even agree with them on whether or not NMN is a dietary supplement. So how can we trust them to tell us that these supplements that they're supposedly going to approve are following some sort of like criteria that we all agree matches DSHEA? That's my take.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't want to like debate you here on this, but I will for a minute. It's not a pre-market approval. The mandatory product. I'm not pro-mandatory or anti-mandatory product. Just like as a reporter, it was a listing requirement. In other words, FDA, what they've said publicly many times is, you would, under this mechanism that they envision that they want congressional authority for, is you list your products with the agency. They don't have to. They don't approve them, but they know at least what the heck is on the market. And then there was a provision that if you didn't do that, they could basically charge you with misbranding a product. So I've heard the pre-market approval. Some people in the industry who I'm friendly with, it wasn't pre-market approval. That's not my interpretation. But definitely there was a debate over the merits of what's FDA going to do with it. Like you're saying, Ben, I mean, FDA, they don't always use the tools they have effectively, so it's like, why give them more authority?
That's a great point. And I think every time I have this conversation, it boils down to, if they can't even audit manufacturing facilities, if they can't even enforce the current amount of regulatory framework that exists, why are we asking them to do more? And who is going to do it?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Shapiro, a well-known attorney, says, you're supposed to submit your structure function claims to the FDA. The claim you make and on the label supports immune health, whatever. And apparently, FDA, they just sit in a cabinet in the basement somewhere. They've never really done anything with them. He's like, well, if you haven't done anything with those for the last 30 years, why are we going to give you 100,000 labels? Yeah. That's ridiculous. That's one argument. And I mean, I guess it probably resonates with a lot of people.
So I'm going to move us in a different direction, just because it's been 20 minutes. You're welcome. I want to talk about GLP-1 because that is a trend, and I'm interested in your perspective, Ben, in sort of the ethics of putting GLP-1 on a label or natural GLP-1. I just did a session about it, an hour ago, and she was like, enjoy your time in the sun because they're coming for you if you do that. I'm just interested in your perspective on that, what you've seen.
It's a great point. I think it's, again, a nuanced position or a nuanced discussion, is that GLP-1 is a pathway that do these ingredients act on? Absolutely. No doubt. 100%. But when most people hear GLP-1, they think drug. And so there's obviously a mental connection there that people are relying on, and I think that's immoral. Mm-hmm. But does berberine work as a natural ingredient that affects that pathway? Without a doubt. And I loved someone on the stage earlier just basically said, like, don't write things you can't back up.
Yeah.
And I think it comes a lot down to the nuance of how are you conveying this? I think that I've had a lot of really great engagement on videos using the phrase nature's Ozempic, because it's a triggering phrase to use. Myself as a consumer, I'm bothered that people use that, but I understand what people are trying to convey. And I think the biggest issue is most likely the influence of consumers and influencers and content creators in like TikTok and Instagram have like boiled down, or maybe more so upwards, towards those companies thinking, oh, this must be okay. Yeah. Because they're getting away with it on TikTok. But I 100% agree with whoever said that they're eventually going to come for this. Yeah. But I mean, kind of coming back to the FDA not having as much manpower, it again becomes what are people going to get away with and why? Where are they going to be looking? Because it's not that FDA hasn't been enforcing anything. They enforce some things. Yeah. We hear about NMN, but we rarely hear about adulterants or misbranded products or amphetamines anymore. it's just whatever direction they're looking. And I do think that GLP-1 is going to be a direction they're looking because, I mean, it's huge.
Yeah. Well, and I do wonder also about the pharmaceutical companies or the companies making these drugs. Like if they're going to be like some loss. I don't know if there's any risk, in your opinion, for lawsuits from actual GLP-1 drug makers into supplements who are making the same claims that like a drug would do. I don't know. And you don't have to know the answer,
That's
Josh.
more Josh than me.
I don't know. Well, I mean, honestly,
We'll see.
We'll see
Yeah.
what happens. I mean, when it comes to like these claims, right? These GLP-1, aggressive claims. I mean, you got FDA potential risk, probably low right now, given the fact that nobody's over there.
Yeah.
You got the state AGs potential risk. Are they really involved? Do they care about it enough? Probably not. You got the FTC. Do they care about it? Probably, yeah. They police advertising. So if you're making aggressive advertising GLP claims on your supplement product, I'd say that's a great case if you're at the FTC, like in the Consumer Protection Branch. I might want to bring that case if it's a big company,
Yeah.
or a company with some resources,
Yeah.
or some companies with no resources, and then you could just get a quick win. So I think there's definitely, and then like I said, the pharma industry might sue you, but I think there's a lot of risk if you get aggressive.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to GLP, the most interesting thing I noticed this week is that last week I was at GNC headquarters, and in their headquarters store they have 4 whole top bottom shelves of just GLP support or metabolic support or all stuff around GLP.
Mm-hmm.
Vitamin Shop is helping consumers get access to doctors with safe access to these drugs. Also supporting with their own, they actually have an in-house brand now of GLP support with an awesome protein. But here at SupplySide, where we're mostly talking about ingredients, I saw absolutely one banner in a whole room of ingredients about GLP, which is really interesting to me because typically SupplySide shows kind of talk about the next 16 months of trends. And there was almost no GLP here. But when you go in store or in app, there's a ton of talk about it. So I don't have an answer on what that means, but I thought it was really interesting that almost nobody was talking about GLP this week outside of your talk.
Yeah, from my perspective, sure, maybe we're kind of beyond that. From maybe a business perspective, this is an ingredient show, and not every ingredient supplier knows exactly what the person they're selling to is putting in their product or putting on their label. So it could just be, we're over this, and also like, here's our ingredient. We don't want to like get into this GLP-1 thing. Like you guys can handle that. Andrew in the back.
So Andrew basically asked, to summarize things, how are people working with GLP ingredients going to protect themselves from a trend that's a flash in the pan? And he compared it to CBD and how that was a huge one. But I'll actually add to the kind of some perspective there. Now you know where I'm going. CBD was huge in the supplement space, but now THC is legal in many states, whether it's the Farm Bill or local recreation or whatever. I think that a lot of CBD companies couldn't keep up with the access to dispensaries. And obviously a lot of us here who fight fair aren't putting THC in supplements because it's not a dietary supplement. And I think similarly with GLP, a lot of people have talked about an oral GLP drug coming out soon. So if you're selling berberine, very soon you're going to be up against people who no longer need to inject it. And I think that injection is a big issue for a lot of consumers who just don't want to stick needles in their body. And so when an oral solution comes out, people aren't going to be going to GNC anymore for it because they can go to their doctor and they don't need an injection anymore. I don't know how to protect against that. I think my best advice that I would give is don't create products just hoping that consumers find them. It's all about go-to-market strategy. You partner with GNC or Vitamin Shop. Have great creators who can explain the product and get it selling on TikTok. A lot of people see trends and jump on it, invest a lot of money into the product, but don't have any sort of way to get it to actually be relevant in industry or in on shelf.
And I'll add to that, Andrew, in my conversation with Jennifer Cooper, she mentioned, don't go out competing with this pharmaceutical. It's stupid. But there are a billion ways to support people who are on it. And like the list of ways to support people who are on it is very, very big. So like that's what she said would be the ultimate guide for people who want to get into this maybe weight loss game, is you don't get in it with an ingredient that will help you lose weight, because we have a drug that does that very, very effectively. But how do you deal with the side effects? And that's a place where supplements can really shine.
Yeah, I think that's where I've supported this whole time. Is I think that consumers are going to get into these drugs. I think it's easy, it's accessible, especially when it goes the oral route.
If you have
Everyone's
money,
going to be interested.
I guess if you oral for sure. Yeah.
But I mean, I'll talk about it again. Vitamin Shoppe just launched a protein that has MyHB and PepiStrong, which are really great for holding on to muscle mass. Most people who are on GLP drugs are not eating nearly as much.
Yeah.
And most consumers in the first place are not consuming enough protein. Then you kill their appetite. They're definitely not consuming enough protein.
Yeah.
So support for those drugs, I think, is where a lot of these companies are going to find opportunities.
Oh yeah, not just muscle mass, but like your skin and
Bone
how
health.
your body feels, your bone health, how tired you are. There's a billion things. A billion.
Absolutely.
I am obviously. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you from up here. That's a great question. And I think that's also another funny thing with the RFK discussion. He asked about peptides. A lot of people like to talk about RFK's love for peptides and for methylene blue, which are like really popular. I'm not going to call them supplements because they're not supplements. And I think that's the funny thing is that he's trying to kill the FDA. I'm sorry, that was a gross generalization. He's going after the FDA in a lot of ways. But peptides have been largely kind of banned from compounding pharmacies, especially like BPC. Also, peptide is a huge generalization.
Yes.
I'm talking about like research chemicals here. It's a hard conversation to have because a lot of the sites that were popularizing these products were never really doing them legally. So it's hard to talk about them in this conversation because I think we all would love to have access to these important products as consumers. Like there's a lot of great safety data on peptides or methylene blue, but frankly, it's just not within the regulatory framework right now. And it would take like DSHEA 2.0 to get that into the discussion. And again, that's opening Pandora's box. Once you start opening up DSHEA, a lot of things can be changed. And I'm really wary about people who don't have our best interests in mind, like getting their hands in that. So, I mean, I love to have peptides in the discussion, but as of right now, it's still technically more of a pharmaceutical discussion. I don't know if you have anything on that.
I got a question for you, Ben. Like as a media person, what the hell should we be covering? There's just so much going on. It's like we talk about this internally at Informa, and I would love to get feedback from the industry in terms of like what are the most important issues to cover. I mean, we wrestle with that all the time. We don't.
Like it changes
we
every
don't
week.
know. You know. I mean, there's so much going on. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, this is really funny because when Cassie called me about this talk 6 months ago, she asked, "What are we going to talk about?" And I said, "I won't know until 2 weeks out." And that's 100% true. I mean, every single week we talk about something different. I thought we were going to be talking about trends of the show a month ago. And it seems like it's like pick of the day. I mean, you work on a story for how long? And all of a sudden, I had to become an expert in tariffs last weekend. I mean, if it weren't for tariffs, what would you have been talking about this week?
The beer, this 0.00 beer, that's pretty tasty.
I do want to talk about functional beverages, and the fact that you accidentally ordered a non-alcoholic beer, I think, is a great part to talk about.
I couldn't really hear the bartender. So she said blah 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 blah, and I said, "Oh yeah, that sounds good."
I do think functional beverages is like a macro trend that if you remove the politics, I think functional foods and functional beverages is what I wanted to talk about today. To be honest with you, I don't want to talk about government affairs. I want to talk about how we can take interesting ingredients that improve consumers' lives or offer them acute benefits and put them in tasty solutions like drinks, foods, stuff like that.
Can I just enter here with
Yeah.
a very, very specific opinion? It really bothers me that we put protein in everything, and just putting 6 grams of protein in your freaking cookie does not make it a protein cookie. That really, I'm sorry.
Especially when it's 6 grams of collagen.
No, well,
It's not even really helpful. Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with
it
you.
just really makes me mad, and it makes, I think, the industry look bad in that we're marketing nothing and calling it healthy, and it's just that rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I want to tell you that it's baby steps because consumers don't understand what cognizant is. People, consumers don't understand yet what kind of benefits they can get from these niche ingredients. And while we could make a really cool formula, like the cans I did at SupplySide,
Yeah.
Expo Energy. Everyone here loved them because we all know, but you put that on a Wawa. If you're from around America, you don't know what Wawa is. It's a convenience store right here. You put that on a shelf, a lot of consumers aren't going to buy it because they don't understand the value proposition. A lot of people just understand protein fortification or caffeine.
Yeah.
I think that mood and like focus benefits, like acute benefits where you can feel mental. We talked about mental benefits recently. I think that's like the next baby step. But some real protein fortification would be really great, like some 25-gram protein brownies.
Right, and I get that taste bad. Like that's hard to formulate with, to put that much protein in something and have it like taste like an actual treat. That's like we can't.
But what's the point of having all of these really great flavor houses? Shout out to Sensapure and like innovation groups here if we can't get like a significant protein dose in a
I
cookie.
agree. I think in general, it's just like taking the easy route. What's like the bare minimum that I could put on a label and have people be like, treat, and it's healthy.
Yeah, but then you have to sell millions of those across America, and consumers have to like how it tastes, and they're still very picky.
They sure are. They sure are. I don't have the right answer for that, but I just like as a health professional, that just like infuriates me.
I can imagine.
Don't eat those cookies out there. Just I don't know. Have a real cookie. It's fine.
But also, every time a functional food comes out, it's like 16 months later they're getting sued for not meeting label claim because they're scaling up and they
Yeah,
just
it's
can't
hard
be
to do. Yeah.
Ben, I got a question for you. So, in your conversations the last couple of weeks, have you talked, especially the last couple of days, actually, like, what's the sentiment you're getting from the C-suite, the business executives, as far as just how they're feeling? And obviously, tariffs is number one, but just in terms of the economy, I know I read something a couple of days ago where a prominent CEO was talking about the R word, recession. You're hearing about it more and more. I'm not trying to scare people, but it's just obvious when you lose $6 trillion in 2 days in stock market value. What are you hearing in terms of what business executives are thinking at this show and elsewhere?
I have a hot take right now.
Oh yes.
The camps are so heavy that certain camps aren't willing to admit that there are things to worry about because other things are going their direction, and they don't want to question the people that they enjoy making the rules. I'm so
Such
sorry.
a nice
The
way
comments
to say
on
a
that are
hot
going to be great.
take.
But it's true, right? We can't have nuanced conversations. We can't have healthy discourse about what we want and what we don't want. There's also games being played with our trade that are greater than just our industry. So, to be honest with you, I don't speak to that many people that worried about it because they all think it's going to work out in the short term. But interestingly enough, I just heard this Q1 retail-wise was one of the best Q1s across our board, not just one retailer or the other. Foot traffic and interest in dietary supplements and nutrition is up enough that a lot of people aren't super concerned. I think one trend that goes along with this is the move towards more essential style products. Over the last 5 years, we saw a huge boom in like big scoop pre-workouts where they're throwing so much powder in because consumers are very educated. They're very interested in all these crazy things. But now we're starting to see very simple formulas that are easy to understand, easy to educate on. But I think it's also like an analog for people wanting to spend less. And so I think that consumers are... if you look back in the day, like when USP Labs was making all these crazy different muscle pills, consumers were spending hundreds of dollars on things that may not have been working all that well. But nowadays, consumers are very aware of the purchases they're making with dietary supplements, and I think that that's possibly part of this. I don't think there's as much frivolous spending. I think weight loss as an entire category has gotten a lot smaller because of this.
So, but let's say we do go into a recession. None of us here are like business people, so this is just all BS. But let's say we go into a recession and there's a lot of lost jobs, which we're already seeing in the federal government, but in the private sector as well. Cassie, what's your take? Do you think there are certain categories where the consumer will, not go to the GNC, the Vitamin Shop, the Amazon, whatever?
I'm trying to remember the accurate sort of data on this. It seems like essential purchases are maintained. So I think like if people feel like their vitamin is essential, they'll keep buying it, but they're gonna buy the cheaper version. So I think if there is even now in this time of uncertainty, like if you're gonna private label, like if Costco, like that Costco brand of multivitamin is probably gonna kill it, as opposed to whatever fancy one is gonna. So I don't necessarily know that people will stop buying them, but they are going for sure to buy the cheaper option.
I think the essential product call out is really interesting, and it's also interesting timing because post 2020, I don't think consumers have ever been so convinced that their health is a valuable asset to invest in. I think that pre 2020, a lot of people didn't understand what taking vitamin D regularly for themselves, or magnesium, or getting enough protein or fiber in was how helpful that was for their health. And I think that is considered to be much more of an essential purchase. I think maybe more of like the more elective supplements probably won't be as interesting to consumers.
Yeah.
But I definitely believe, magnesium, vitamin D, multivitamins, protein, stuff like that, fiber. Yeah. I think that those will still be in people's carts. Will they be going to Costco and getting the more cost-effective? Maybe, possibly. But over the last few years, there's been a lot of concern about like specialty retail. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting it's up right now, but it's definitely a question mark with this whole R-word talk.
Ben, I have a question for you before we sort of get going. You have an interesting viewpoint of the industry. I don't know if I would call it bird's eye because you're kind of in it, but you're also out of it. And I'm wondering what you see as the opportunity or white space. Like, what are we missing?
I did a podcast a couple years ago called the PricePlow Authority Report, where I would bring 4 people on that were like ultra educated in different areas. I'd bring like retail, formula, regulatory, and I did 2 episodes a month back, and I remember my buddy, used to be the owner of Ghost before they sold, Dan Lorenzo, called me and he's like, loved the episode last night, so much information, I got so much from it. The problem is approximately 12 other people in the world did too. Let me ask you a question. Who's speaking to the millions of people who just want to know what creatine is? And that completely changed the way that I thought about it, because you're right. Like, I'm like in the trenches, and I was so obsessed with like new data that I thought that was all that mattered. But to be honest, I really think that right now, so many consumers are interested in health, mm-hmm. right? We've got Huberman Lab, huge. Mm-hmm. We've got all these biohackers and so much information out there that consumers are like really hungry for. And I think that how we speak to those new consumers is what matters the most. I love talking about specialty stuff. I love talking shop. I love talking about new ingredients that we're not going to be on the market for another 2 years. But the truth is, I think that educating consumers and getting them quality products so that, media can't come out and say that we're selling snake oil. I think that's the big opportunity right now, is like transparent quality supplements for mainstream people.
Well said. I just hope that, we have regulators to oversee this category, because I know there's a lot of great players in the industry, but I don't think you can just rely on self-regulation. That model does not work. That's why we have a government. So we need the government, unfortunately.
It's a hot take, but I don't think anyone can disagree with you. You look at like adulterants in the industry. You look at bad actors over the years. Someone needs to stand up to them. And as much as me posting a video on Instagram calling these people out is like enjoyable, I don't really have as much teeth as obviously the FDA would. So totally agreed.
I mean, that's our 45 minutes.
That was 45 minutes. We have any other questions?
Fast.
The last comment kind of sounded like a call to action.
Yeah. Well, so Elias said it sounds like a call to action with Deshay 2.0. I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't think any of us really disagree a lot with Deshay or the way that it stands, but there's obviously like peptides being brought up or transdermals. There's a lot of things that just weren't around when Deshay was kind of being spoken about. It's interesting. I'm looking forward to our day on Capitol Hill, or days this year on Capitol Hill, to see what we even get to talk about or who's even there to talk to us. I think if things are going to be changing, and I think we need one of these.
I agree. I think that the supplement industry and healthy food and beverage is very well positioned right now to make a big impact on the health of America if we do better. Like, stop. I know this is so hard to say, and like, we make money, we're here to make money, we're a capitalist society, but like, your responsibility is to do good for your consumer. And if you can't get past making a shit product, just to make money. Like, we're never going to have the buy-in from the consumer. We're never going to have the buy-in from the government. Like, we have to do better. And like, that's, I think, my biggest takeaway from really talking to everyone this weekend and seeing what's going on. Like, we have to.
Yeah, but it's an echo chamber. You're talking to people that are here. I'm sure these people they're professionals. They take their job very seriously. They take quality seriously. They want to make a buck, but they also, have integrity. There's a lot of companies out there that they don't have to belong to a trade association, but it doesn't hurt. They don't belong to a trade association. They don't care about these issues. And so it's just like everybody's talking to themselves. And the message needs to be disseminated more widely, and I think that's a big challenge.
I'll end this on probably more of a positive note of a call to action, but I think a lot of brands love to base their marketing around we're better than the other companies because they protein spike or they, et cetera, et cetera. Cage did a video last week that was produced beautifully. It was really cool. There's cool acting of a board meeting of supposed big supplement, C-suite people talking about, the FDA will never come for us. Look at everyone else. They're, ripping consumers off. Good for us. Profits are up. It doesn't really point to a quality industry when we're constantly making fun of ourselves. And I think that the biggest thing that we need is a call to action of unity, right? I'd love for our trade associations to work together. I love for our echo chamber to speak out to the world in a much more positive note. One of the reasons I stopped doing so many negative videos, other than just ruining all of my time with negative comments, was it didn't help anything.
Yeah.
I was only talking about negativity. I was kind of pulling all of ourselves down instead of lifting everyone up. There's a lot of really quality people that care a lot, and I think that needs to be the message. I think we all need to go down to Capitol Hill and work together. You said you don't have to be part of a trade association. I totally agree. I don't think anyone has to, but if you want to say that your company cares about these kinds of things, and if you want to say that you want to see better in the world, being part of a trade association is one of the better ways to get active.
Yeah, and just to follow up, and I promise, Ben, I'll shut up, is you can agree to disagree. I just wish that in this industry there would be more respect for each other, there'd be more productive dialogue, people that were completely on opposite ends of the spectrum, whether it's politics, religion, the economy, whatever, that they could talk and have a meaningful, respectful dialogue. And I don't see that all as often as I'd like to, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
I think we all agree that quality nutrition is most important, and getting that out to everyone and protecting it.
Yeah.
I think we all agree on that. So, thank you so much for hosting me here. This has been really cool, and I hope to do more of it.
Yeah, this was very fun.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for everyone showing up.
Bye.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.